And hello, everybody. It is Sunday night, and we are back for another Tales from the Triptych here on Trusty Huckster Mercantile Channel. You got Trusty coming to you tonight, telling the tale of Hot Wheels. And tonight we have the complete Triptych has collected itself once again. And so we have Katie from Vintage and Vinyl is joining us.
Welcome, everyone. So glad you could join us this evening.
And we did a little some last minute schedule wrangling, and we were able to get Nate to join us once again. And so we got Nate from Soul Nate coming in from New Zealand.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again.
And I'm very excited to have Nate because this, I think, is a very American topic. So I'm definitely going to be talking to Nate a little bit about what kind of exposure he's had to it in New Zealand. What you're seeing on the screen are actually my toys from childhood. These are the Hot Wheels I used to play with, that I grew up with. Nate and I are basically the same age, and so these should be a thing that Nate would have been exposed to as well. But we were talking a little bit, Nate. You really don't have a lot of background with Hot Wheels, do you?
No, they certainly didn't tow my Malibu Stacy dream caravan as a child. I'm aware of Hot Wheels. I'm not sure if they were particularly around when I was a kid. I don't know if I know them from advertising more recently, or maybe when my niece and nephew were kids. I seem to remember there were toys like this, but they were more likely corgis or another well-known English brand.
Yes. And I won't be touching on those. There's corgis, there's Matchbox, there's all kinds of versions that, again, and I know Matchbox, I think, is British. I think corgis are British too.
Yeah. Okay. Corgis are British.
And I'm not sure corgis were that popular here in the States. I don't think I became aware of those until more my adulthood. What kind of background do you have with Hot Wheels, Katie?
I have a fun background with Hot Wheels. We actually had a set of them growing up. Every time we would go visit my stepmom's sister, she had a bunch of them in the closet, and we would get them out. And she had a big ramp. She had one of those little ramps, and then the parking deck for them all. So they would all be lined up. And then we would set up these massive ramps, my brother and I would, across the living room, and build all these cool little connector pieces together. And then you could do, tricks and hope that they would make the round across the loop. So it was always fun. I really enjoyed Hot Wheels growing up.
So these actually came with a ramps system or a road system that you'd put together. You just wouldn't be playing with these on the linoleum or on the concrete.
There's two different, just like anything in America, you always had the accessories. So, you always had to have ways to spend more money because the toy was not enough by itself. But this is different than slot cars. So if that's what you're thinking of, Nate. So there were the ramps where they were electrified and they fit in, and you would actually race them, but they were on an actual track that you could build. But those were slot cars. These were really, you could buy little garages, you could buy, you have little street layouts. I don't think I had any of that growing up. I think we just had the cars. So we just played with them, on the carpet. It was like all, 4-wheel drive, all terrain, going through the shag carpeting. I don't think we had a little carry case, which I actually still have, that had the little plastic trays that you could like seal it all up so you could carry them, so you could put them all away. But I don't think we had any of the extra stuff. So we didn't have any of that. So I don't know if those were Hot Wheels branded or if those were like ancillary things for other cars or other, just toy stuff with the slot cars and with some of that, because this was a standard miniaturization that you could use for like railroad trains and stuff like that. You could use this all over the place. So we're going to cover, and so Hot Wheels could become a massive, massive, massive conversation. And so we're going to try and keep it relatively condensed by sticking specifically within the red lines. But before we get into that, looks like we have a couple people in the chat. So who do we have joining us tonight?
We've got Chad here. Hi, Chad from Retro Days, Tearfane. Tim's here. Jerry's here from Vintage and Vino. Diana from Little Vintage Me 64. And Brian from Brian Hans Chicagoland's here.
Fabulous. And we've got Tim and Jerry, Vintage Avino. Sharon Delaney is here. Amy B is tuning in. Jerry from My Flea Market Treasures. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, and definitely, as if you're already in the chat or haven't found the chat, definitely throw in some of your own personal memories or talk about what you had growing up. Again, these are toys that I actually had. Some of them, you can actually see just from some of these photos, like the little truck there, the paint's fairly chipped. These were very well used. Like these were not kept in their blister packs. These were not tucked away for value. These were banged into each other. These were, these fell down the stairs, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to talk about the original days of Hot Wheels, which is where these came from. And if you look at the little red truck, you can see when you look at the side of the wheels are red. And for a very original name, they call this initial series of Hot Wheels, they call them redlines because there is a red line around the wheel. So redlines is what we're going to focus on tonight so we can kind of keep the conversation a little bit more condensed. So we're going to start with the basics. So redline, and I'm almost 90% of what I'm going to cover comes from this website. So if you are interested in Hot Wheels, if you're interested in redlines, you're interested in some of the information, particularly as we get into the very specifics of the individual cars that they made, the colors, all that kind of stuff, onlineredlineguide.com. I'm not sponsored by this person. I don't know this person. I don't even know who maintains this, but this is just it became a great jumping off point to kind of cover all of the stuff that we're going to kind of focus on tonight. And so the red line is what is referenced for the first 10 years that they produced their cars. So from 1968 until 1977, the red lines tires were used on the different Hot Wheels. And they released different cars in each year. Some cars were manufactured for more than 1 year. Different cars are manufactured in different colors. So we're going to go into the different combinations. It's going to be impossible to cover it all. And a lot of what we're going to talk about is really going to be highlighting what is a red line or what is an original, and then how to recognize some of these so that if you are a reseller, if you are looking to collect yourself, what to be on the lookout for to know, do you have an original? Do you have a reproduction? Because we're going to talk about reproductions, but that kind of covers a couple of different categories. And it says right on here in very bold type, because again, this website is a great jumping off point. Just because it has a red line or a red stripe does not mean the car is a true red line. One reason is because you can replace some of the wheels. And in some cases, you can replace them with red line wheels. And I will cover that in repros.
Oh, interesting.
But more importantly, basically the Mattel who did the Hot Wheels cars recognized the popularity of collecting Hot Wheels, and they actually introduced a Redline Collectors Club in 2001, and they started introducing red lines again. So you can't just look for a red line. You have to kind of piece together some of these other things that we're going to talk about, and we're going to cover them here. So 1968 was the first year that Hot Wheels were created. That is referred to and what they released is as shown here. It is the Sweet 16. They released 16 individual models of cars. Now, each one of the models had different paint colors, so there were different combinations. And as we'll get into it, they were produced in 2 different locations, which surprisingly had resulted in 2 different types of looks. So we're going to kind of cover some of the basics, but this website, again, it's a great place. You can jump in by year. One of the things to be aware of in 1968 is one of the, it kind of not really an exception, but all of the cars, as we go into them, all of the cars will be marked on the bottom with the year they were manufactured or with the year of their copyright. Typically, the year that shows up is the year prior to the year they were released, except in 1968. Since 1968 was the first year, if it says 1968, it is a model that was introduced in its first year. But what is most important to note about the way the models are marked, the individual die casting of the body will show the year the first copyright was made. It was not changed. So if a car was manufactured across 5 years, it would always say the earliest year it was manufactured. So when you talk about the Sweet 16, there were cars that were created in 1968, and you may have an item, or you may have a car that says 1968 on it, but it does not necessarily mean it was from the 1968 release. So I know that sounds really confusing, so we're going to go through some of these, and trust me, this was way more baffling than I thought it would be. I thought this was going to be a pretty easy, straightforward, won't this be fun? Let's all relive our childhood. And all I figured out was my childhood sucked, because this was crazy. And I didn't know any of this stuff. And learning about it as an adult was very confusing. So we're going to start with the Sweet 16. And again, this website is fantastic. These were the 16 models that were created. Now, as you kind of go through them, you'll see there's a lot of cars that are called custom. That is actually molded into the bottom of the diecast. It says custom Barracuda, custom Camaro, custom Corvette, where a lot of times you might get into custom, that doesn't mean anything. You do need to keep that in mind. You do need to pay attention to the diecast, because in some cases they recreated some of the models, but not as customs. So across the manufacturing, even within the red lines, but then plus they're still being manufactured today, you may have another Corvette that is not considered the custom Corvette. So if you see it says custom Corvette, you're in the earlier generation. If it's Corvette something else, you are in a later. It doesn't mean they're less valuable, and that's actually really important to note. Being a red line does not automatically make it valuable, and not being a red line does not mean it is not valuable. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind, but this is why they were so much fun. Look at these cars. So these came out in 1968, which was 2 years before I was born, a year before Nate was born. Now, Nate, do you have some of these models in New Zealand? I have no idea what car manufacturers or what the import life was for American cars in New Zealand.
I mean, we would have seen the occasional Volkswagen Beetle, but cars like Mustangs and Corvettes, you are very rare on the roads here. I have a cousin who has some American cars. I don't know what type they are, but those are the big, generous saloons sort of things. And I have a friend who imports cars from the States, and I think he's had some American, a Nash. I think he imported a Nash, if that's an American car. Yep. But you would if one of these cars was going down the road here, heads would turn, most certainly.
Well, I would say if any of these rolled down the road, even here, I think heads would turn too. Now, I've never even heard of a Diora.
No, I've never seen that car.
Yeah, so that one, and a couple of these, like the Beatnik Bandit, were based off of famous cars that were created from that time. So in some cases, the Camaro, the Corvette, the Firebird, the Eldorado, Cougar, they're going to be names that people know. But they did try and mix it up because, again, this was the very first year. No one knew how popular it was going to be. No one knew, was this going to become the absolute craze that it became? Now, I would say, although this is before my time, there was nothing in any of the research that I did that indicated that the craze for these was anywhere on the level of like Beanie Babies or Cabbage Patch Kids or anything like this. I think they were popular. I think, kids wanted them, particularly for boys wanted them. It just ended up being a great gift giving option. And these were the first 16. Now, I'm also going to cover this in a little bit, but this is a really nice overview that most of these are showing pretty nicely. If you look at these pictures, and this is how you're going to differentiate as we're going forward, you're going to differentiate in some cases. These models were made across multiple years. In some cases, the paint is what's going to differentiate them. And if you look at this initial launch, most of these paints have a metallic look to them.
Yeah.
And so that was unique to one of the color lines. And we're going to cover that. But I wanted to show that here because it's just a really nice overview of some of those shinier, kind of sexier colors, as opposed to some of the more traditional enamels, which they started doing, which, to be honest, ended up being cheaper. But kind of going into just some examples, and again, jumping off of this as a website is a great resource. Every one of those individual cars of the Sweet 16 has its own landing page, and it covers information such as how long was it produced. So the Beatnik Bandit was actually produced for multiple years. Sometimes things were only produced for a year because they were expensive to manufacture or they were difficult or different reasons. This one did, in its initial design, did exist for 3 years, 68, 69, and 70. And one of the things that we're going to talk about, and we're going to go into the country a little bit, but one of the things we're going to talk about is initially the Hot Wheels were manufactured in both United States and Hong Kong, which I was not aware of that. So this was not a case where they started in the United States and then they moved to Hong Kong because it was cheaper. They actually started producing in both locations at the same time. So in 1968, the cars that were manufactured, some were manufactured in the United States, some were manufactured in Hong Kong, and they'll be very clearly indicated on the bottom who manufactured. Again,
Do you know why they were manufactured in two different places, Patrick?
I never figured out why. Eventually, they stopped being manufactured in the United States and only did Hong Kong, and that was a cost savings. So I don't know why they try to do them in both locations right off the gate. That I haven't figured out. So this was an example. It was an actual show car that was actually dated back to 1963. So I guess in the late 60s, people would have just recognized this as kind of a cool or funky looking car. And so they created that as part of the Sweet 16 that they started with. But if you look at the manufacturing, you can see on these, and this is the reason I picked this one is because there's a couple pretty significant differences whether they were manufactured in the United States or in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong is on the left, the United States is on the right. You can see that the engine block is different. The shape of the headlights is different. The shapes of the radiator grille is different. The glass or the plastic is blue in the Hong Kong version versus clear in the United States version. There will be people that will have a preference one versus the other. I couldn't find enough examples to find enough values to know, well, were the US ones always more valuable versus the Hong Kong ones from the same years? So that I wasn't able to figure out. But I will say, again, if you remember, they did stop making them in the United States after a few years. So if you have it made in the USA version, you do have one of the earliest ones. So it will retain some of its value simply because you can almost guarantee it's only from the first couple of years that they were produced. But if you were to find both of these, I couldn't find enough data to showcase or any history to showcase what the differences in values were. But each one had a slightly different modeling as they were created. And you can kind of see the profiles changed a little bit. And then here is on the bottom. So you've got the United States one is on the right, and you can see it says 1968 Mattel Incorporated USA. On the left side, the picture, they didn't do a very good picture, but if you shift up to the top half, you can see there's the year is up here, and then you can barely see it right where my cursor is. You can see make out the word Hong. So there's Hong Kong. So they're always going to be very clearly indicated who manufactured them, whether they're made in the United States or made in Hong Kong. And because of that, it's not like you're ever going to find a United States made Beatnik Bandit with a blue lens or a blue hood. The blue is only going to be on the Hong Kong. The clear is only going to be on the US. So it really ends up being one of those cases that as you learn that these differences exist, and there is no way I would ever be able to retain all of this information, but you could say at a glance, like if somebody had filed down the bottom or it was rusted out so badly you couldn't read it, there would be other indications that would indicate whether this was something that was a US made or a Hong Kong made.
It also looks, Patrick, like the red line on the wheels are a little bit different in their diameter.
Yes, we are going to talk about the wheels because that is its own weirdness all by itself that I've struggled to even come up with enough photographs and enough data to even talk about it logically because the wheels changed 3 times during the lifespan of the red lines. and they look different whether they were manufactured in the United States or if they were manufactured in Hong Kong. So there are so many tiny variations that this could be a full-time job. Whoever's doing this website is doing yeoman's work, because they have collected all of this data and has made it so easy, relatively speaking, to come in and catch things. Because you can even see, as you get into things like this, the interior's changed. So the drivers, the steering wheel, well, this one doesn't even look like a wheel, but this one is white where this one is black. So you ended up having all these variations. Again, never figured out necessarily why, but even from day one, there were some that were made in the United States, some that were made in Hong Kong, and it was an international market. So it may have been more that the Hong Kong ones were for international market, but I have early ones that are made in Hong Kong that ended up in the United States. So even that doesn't seem to be, an exact breakdown. Again, the first ones had these metallic colors on them. And so you can see, even though one Beatnik Bandit model was released in 1968, it was released in all of these color combinations. And then even as this is showing, you've got the color combinations, some with the blue lid and some with the clear. So you could actually get into collecting dozens and dozens of examples just to get all of the different combinations that were available between the fact they were manufactured in the United States and in Hong Kong. So then this is an example of, this is a much different scale. The originals are 1/24th. This is 1/18th. So you've got a much larger version. They manufactured that in 2002. So that would never confuse anybody because it's significantly larger. You can see where you jumped off at. But the discussion on the country of origin, again, looking at the Beatnik, we wanted to cover. Looks like I lost my spot on this one. No, I was going to show another couple models. Let me jump back to the other screen, and we'll look at the Volkswagen Beetle. Had a couple of different variations in it. It's one of the drawbacks of trying to have the same website open on multiple tabs. Sometimes it resets itself, so it looks like I reset a bunch of the options. I apologize.
No worries.
But again, so this one again was multiplied across multiple years, and this one introduced the concept where you had two variations just within Hong Kong. Some that had a sunroof and some that didn't have a sunroof. You had interior colors, the glass color changed. This is actually one of the nicer tools within this website because the colors does make a fairly significant impact on pricing if you're trying to collect them or resell them. And so this is, rule of thumb on the Beatnik Bandit. A lot of these were blank. Doesn't mean that they weren't available in those colors. It just meant that they just, for whatever reason, had not had enough data to put whether they were common or hard to find. And some of the things, when you come across them, you will find, okay, some of them would be considered extremely rare. And when you find a yellow, it is more expensive than the others. A lot of people, just like Nate said, a lot of people recognize a Volkswagen. So you've got, again, the US version with the sunroof, and then the Hong Kong with a sunroof. And then at one point they changed. You can see the way the die cast was changed a little bit between the Hong Kong and the United States. Flying colors was a variation of the colors that they did in 1974. That was when it became a little bit, they basically started making them a little bit cheaper. So by 1974, all the wheels had changed. By 1974, everything was manufactured in Hong Kong. So a lot of things changed as of 1974. So you can even see some of the variations. And again, the problem is, whether you call it a problem, but when you look at the years on them, in some cases, the year that it was copyrighted is the year that stays on there even into the later 70s. So it makes it like, oh, hey, I've got one from 1968. Well, you got to look at the wheels. You got to look at the country of manufacturing. You got to look at all the other stuff to verify, was it actually an item that was made in 68, or was it something that was released later? And it, again, can have an impact on the price.
Now, Patrick, do people collect all of the different colors within one of the cars?
That tends to be kind of the white whale or the unicorn, is that, yes, they will pick the car that they like, or a series of cars that they like, and then they try and get them in every color that's available. There's also a subculture, which I discovered as I started promoting this show, because I was promoting it on Instagram and posting some of the photographs of my collection. And I had all of these people that are into Hot Wheels started, they just liked the photo because I was showing old Hot Wheels. And so I looked at their pages, and there's this whole thing of customizing them. So in the ones that have, really had a hard life and are not in great condition, in some cases people are repainting them, putting new decals on them, giving them new life. Are they technically making a reproduction? They're just giving it a different version, but then you're going to be faced with something in an entirely unique color that doesn't have anything to do with anything that Mattel did. So is that still collectible, or does that turn it into an art form? Everyone's going to have a different reason to collect as they go. But it would be almost impossible, although people would do it. It would be almost impossible to collect every car of every production year in every color combination. There would just be too many of them. What's important to note is the blister packs. All the ones that I have, because they were all played with, these were my actual toys. The blister packs are long gone. I couldn't even told you what the blister pack would have looked like. If you have an original red line in its blister pack, and we will go through values in a little bit, they are worth big bucks because it's basically new old stock. It's been protected for 50 years and never been brought out of its packaging. The minute you open it, it will lose its value. So it's just one of those cases that different people will collect for different reasons. Some people would want to play with them, and other people will just create massive, massive displays. One of the most important pieces I kind of alluded to is when you get into the country of manufacturing is the fact that although up till 1973, items were made in both Hong Kong and the United States, as this little summary gives, by 1973, everything had shifted to Hong Kong. Now, that has a connection to the wheel system, as I mentioned. So the red lines are something that, people are like, oh, it's got a red line. That's great. That's how you're going to know it's old. Well, there's variations within it. And one of them starts happening by 1974, once everything is shifted over to Hong Kong. There are fewer variations, basically, because now you suddenly don't have the United States model. So let me go into the discussion of the wheels. So as you had mentioned, Katie, there are variations on what the wheels looked like. So first, we've got 3 types of wheels. So you can see here, again, we're still on the online red line guide. The bearing wheels were what the initial series was released with. So from 1968 to 1970, they were using bearing wheels. And these are the 3 styles of wheels they use depending on the car. And if you look over here on the right-hand side, you see this little like off-white cylinder. That is the bearing. So in these cases, you had these 3 wheels, depending on what size. I have one item that actually has 2 size wheels. The front wheel is smaller and the rear wheel is larger because it's like a hopped up, hot rod. So in some cases, it's just whatever model that car had. But from 1968 to 1970, if you have this little bearing, you have a bearing wheel. And so that is one of the earliest. Now, both Hong Kong and the United States both did that, but only from 1968 to 1970. But you can see capped wheels overlapped it. So you did bearing wheels through 1970, but starting in 1969, they introduced capped wheels. So everyone needs to start paying real close attention. So these are the differences between the United States and the Hong Kong. These are, again, the bearing wheels. Now we're going to scroll down a little bit. We're still going to show the bearing wheels. This is also saying that sometimes the paint looks a little bit different. Mine are so worn, it was hard to tell. But then you jump into the capped wheel system. I can barely tell the difference on the outside. There aren't as many variations, but when you're looking at the wheel by itself, the bearing wheel and the capped wheel look very similar from the profile. What is different is what the capped wheel snaps onto. So where if you go back to the bearing wheel, This was the bearing, and you can see how big the hole is in the inside of these wheels. This entire wheel would slip over this bearing, and that's what would hold the wheel together. The capped wheel, this is what the wheel snaps onto. So you actually have a tread on the side of your wheel that when you put this on, you would actually have a ridge where the side of this wheel matches this wheel. And it's the easiest one to find because if you look here, it's a little misleading because it looks like there is a ridge here and there actually is, but just you can see this is mine. This is that bearing. So this is a bearing wheel. So you can see this entire wheel, even though it has a little bit of a lip there, this entire wheel sits on this bearing, and you have to really pay attention and really be able to look because you then have this wheel, which you can see has a much thicker piece here. If you ran your fingernail across this, you would feel this separate. And if you look down here, you don't see that big plastic bearing. You now see just the rod with this big piece attached to it. So this is a capped wheel. So capped wheels are the easiest to find because you're going to have a very distinct ridge, because you can replace wheels. In order to replace them, you literally have to slide a little knife in between the two pieces to pop the capped wheel off. So you've got a very severe separation, you've got a capped wheel. If you don't have a separation, or you don't have a distinct separation, because this is all one piece, or you have a hole in the side and you have a solid wheel, this is the third generation of wheels, which was the one piece through hole. So the through hole, if you look at it from the side, is a little bit easier to tell because there's literally a big hole in the middle of the wheel where this pin, which is what the end of the axle, which is what's holding this on. Easiest way to tell from this case is, again, these are very wide wheels that are very smooth all the way across. So if it's dirty or you can't tell from the end, if you again use your fingernail to slide across this, if it's one smooth surface, you either have a one-piece wheel system, the through-hole system, or you might have a bearing system, but you then need to look to see what it's attached to, because you should be able to see the bearing if it happens to be this one. But you can see this is not open at the end. So these are all closed off because these are going to go snap onto this bearing here. So the easiest thing to check for it initially is if you have this hole. If you have this hole, it means it is from 1974 and beyond. But because Mattel likes to mess with our minds, in 1973, they had cars, and I have one of them, they had cars that had both. So in some cases, in 73, you had capped wheels in the rear and through-hole wheels in the front.
Oh, wow.
So you literally look at the profile of your car, and you see one set of wheels has the hole in it with this pin, and the other one looks like this. So I don't even know why they did that. There was no explanation of why they did that, but that was only during that transition year. Maybe they were trying to get rid of all their old wheels. I have no idea. Yeah. But in 1974, they had all moved to this through hole. And so that becomes extremely important as you're trying to date your cars, because if it has this, it can't be before 1974. Might be 73 if you have a mix. You could argue there might be some in 73 where they were basically done that. But for the most part, doesn't mean it's necessarily less valuable. It just means you might have a later generation than you thought you had. So again, these are photos from within my own collection and the best I could do to showcase the difference between the two. So wheels are going to help you identify a lot from the age. Colors are going to help you identify for value. So in the cases of the individual cars, again, I showed the Sweet 16. I showed they all had kind of the metallic look to them. They're called Spectra Flame. So the Spectra Flame colors are those metallic-y colors. And over the course of the generation of all the red lines, These are the variations that they created that were called Spectra Flame. And you can see they all kind of have a luster to them to some degree. I would argue this one doesn't seem as lustrous. The red doesn't seem as lustrous as some of the others, but that could just be the way the light was hitting it. So it's one of those, and we hate when we do this in these triptychs, but you kind of have to see it in person to start recognizing, well, what's the difference between all the different pieces. But this is a great jumping off guide. And this is extremely important if you are a reseller to be able to identify the color correctly. Because you can see there is a blue, there's a light blue, there's an ice blue, there's a Windex blue. Where the hell did that come from?
Windex
So
blue.
if you are going to list something for resale, you want to name it correctly. Now, a true collector is going to say, well, you named it ice blue, but clearly the Windex blue. You might get a little nasty gram. They might tell you, or they might just walk away because like you clearly don't know what you're going. So unless you're selling it for too cheap, they're going to walk away from it. It's all knowledge is power. And that's what these triptychs are all about, is trying to give you the information. And this, again, it's still this online redline guide. It's this great place to go to. You have a jumping off point of all of the different colors that were offered, because you get into the magenta enamel, doesn't look all that different from the red if you took a poorly lit picture. The pinks, how would you know the difference between a nuclear hot pink versus a hot pink? So this is just giving you examples again of the Spectra Flames which they created, and I'm not clear how long these colors were used. But what happened was in the later years, they introduced the enamels. These are less, there's not that metallic effect to them. A lot of the ones I have are these enamel colors. Again, knowing the difference between lemon yellow and yellow, could not tell you because this is on a computer. And even the way this highlights it, it says differences in people's own color vision. It's just very difficult to be able to say this is what it is until you can start comparing individual pieces. But it's, again, good to know what is out there. So if you suddenly have 3 different yellows, well, one of them either was repainted or it's somehow the paint has somehow aged. Maybe it's nothing more than just it's an old version. But here's some examples of the 73 colors, which is getting into the enamels. Again, a lot of the ones I have are enamels. And then you get into from 74 to 77, that's when you get into quote unquote the flying colors. And that was referenced in one of the, I think it was the Volkswagen. We talked about the flying colors. Again, flying colors started in 1974. So if you think about the transition times, 1974 was also when all production was shifted to Hong Kong. All production shifted to the through-hole wheels, one-piece wheels. So a lot of things started getting simplified in 1974 simply to make the colors or to make the productions cheaper. So again, there's still some beautiful colors, but there is a change in those colors. And I don't think you see as many of the Spectra Flame colors later, but I never got an end date to when the Spectra Flame ended, if that lasted through the red lines, which was into 77, or not. But red lines ended in 77, and that's when the flying colors also claim to have ended as well. Showing some examples of the colors. One of the pictures was every variation of the Buzz Off. So according to this website, the Buzz Off was available in 6 colors. And again, this and this in the wrong eyes could be the same color. You've got a little bit of a variation there, and you've got 2 different types of blues. So I just brought it in as a kind of a jumping off point. I actually did a search for Hot Wheels Buzz Off. The benefit to Hot Wheels is the name of the car is always molded into the diecast. So you never have to wonder what the car is called. So even if you know nothing and you're selling a Hot Wheel, you know what you're selling because it says it right there in the bottom as long as you can read it. So when I did that, you can see some of the prices that are available. So you've got that green and that yellow that look very similar, and you've got the red. Now these are asking prices, but I specifically picked up the asking prices because I wanted you to see that there are some variations. This is basically $300 a car. Just that lime green color, the fluorescent green enamel, $295 just for the one car.
Wow.
Here's a set
That's
of 4, and
amazing.
this one completely banged up. Even that was asking for $139, and also asking for $160 in shipping. So not 100% sure what they're doing. I'd say I was getting a seat on the Concorde. The Concorde doesn't exist anymore, so I don't know what that's all about. The pink, $233 for the pink. Now this one's still in the blister pack. So this is going all the way into 1977. So this is the very last year that they were available in the red line. It says right on here, flying colors. That was how they were promoted during that time. That one, so even though it's one of the later colors, it's still asking $165, $140. This one's in used condition, asking for $130. So you've got kind of a breakdown of how some of those colors do affect the price, and even bad condition sometimes can still get big bucks depending on how rare some of the color combinations are. Now, because of the group that we're in, because of what Katie always does things with advertising. I like the advertising stuff too. One of the things that I loved about what Hot Wheels did, it made it fascinating, but also makes it ridiculously complicated to try and follow it, is they did a bunch of promotions. And in many cases, they did cars that existed earlier in generations. They reissued them with the original castings, but in different colors. So that's what makes it different. That's what makes it difficult. So unlike a reproduction, unlike some of the things I'm going to talk about later, these were cars, and I'll show as a specific example. So it's, I'll come back and cover some of these too, but I'll jump down to the one that I own. I own the Rocket by Baby, which was a car that was issued in 1969, and it was reissued in 1973 as part of the Shell Oil promotional release. So it's the exact same car, it's the exact same casting, but they changed the colors. So what I have is the yellow Rocket by Baby. Now I do not have the packaging. So if you still have the packaging, it says right on here, from participating Shell dealers. Suddenly Katie's making notes. She's got a new collection to start. You've got the information. You've got, these were not in blister packs. They were just little hang bags. This one doesn't even have the circle knocked out for it to be hung. So this one wasn't even on display. Of these individual cars, you can see the cars that they released, and then they came in basically these colors became available in all of the different cars. So Rocket by Baby was available in this blue and in pink and in yellow and in green. But these are enamels, so these are a little bit later. So even though the Rocket by Baby that I have has the original model number from 1969, it is actually a 1973 Shell promo casting. So that's what makes things very confusing. Some people will know what they are selling and some people will not. So again, if you have one, and again, this is the Rocket by Baby, but if you have a Rocket by Baby in a red enamel or any of these colors, or in my case, the yellow, I again did kind of a little snapshot. I did a search for Hot Wheels Rocket by Baby yellow, because yellow did not exist in the original color variation. They had the Spectra Flame colors, but they did not have a yellow enamel. You can see some people, again, this one has the actual packaging, so they knew it was the Shell release, and they're asking $244 for it. This one is no longer in the Shell. There's no reference that this was from the Shell promotion. They think they have, although they did say 1973, so they actually knew that one was a little bit later. This one, they're just saying it's 1970 though. So they don't recognize that this is Shell, that this color came from a later time. They're just pricing it based on what everything else is selling for. Is it relevant? Maybe, maybe not. Like, they're going to sell for what they're going to sell for. But what happens is, in something like this, the reason these are more valuable is because from a cross collectability standpoint, if you're a Shell collector, well, you want all of those cars that were available as a Shell promotion. You probably want them in the hang bags, but if you can't do that, you're going to at least start by trying to find all of these cars which had all been released in an earlier edition. You're going to try and find them in the colorways that were released for the Shell promotion. So that's why some of these will start getting a little bit more expensive. They were a limited release, so that also helps. So they're not like as available. But it's again, knowledge is power. So when you're listing it, it's good to put the word shell into the listing, because then someone who collects shell is going to come across it. And even if they didn't know there was a shell promotion, they're going to do the research and realize, oh, I need these. And so you see here's a yellow one. For some reason, the pink one showed up when I did this search for yellow. So there must be some description of what other colors it was available in. And even some pretty poor shaped ones are asking for some decent prices. So we're going to cover the values overall. And again, we're covering 10 years worth of releases, multiple variations of them, some models that were available for single years, some model for multiple years, all these different colors. It's crazy, what you're going to try and cover, or what you're going to try and research. So a lot of collectors will pick categories, they'll pick the year, they'll pick a color, they'll pick something that they're going to try and then quote unquote complete their collection. So sometimes prices might pop up simply because one person needed that one item and they were willing to pay a lot more for it because it finished their collection. So you're always going to have things like that. But it was fun to kind of do a little bit of research. So this is on WorthPoint. I just simply did a search for redline. So you got some weird things showed up too. But you're always going to have things like these were prototypes. $100,000 for a prototype, it seems insane.
Wow.
So whatever. It's like that is its own category. That may have been a drug deal. Who knows? They're money laundering. I don't know. That's kind of the exception. This is $97,000, but look how many cars were incorporated into that. What I thought was fun, though, is again, you don't know what you need to collect until you come across one, is the Sweet 16 store display. So again, 68, they released 16 models, and they actually had a counter display that showed the 16 models. They had a little platform for all of them. They all had their names. They had the additional colors, Hot Wheels Supercharger. Like here's what Nate was talking about. There's a little picture of it. Looks like a little plastic garage that you could drive your cars into. So like these are the other pieces you could buy. Who remembers the tire shaped carrying case that carries your Hot Wheels? That was released in 1968. This piece sold for $36,000 just for the display. I don't even think I'm not even sure if the cars were, maybe the cars were in it too, but does it say the cars were in there? The cars included, so it must have included the cars. So that's one of the reasons it was so expensive, but still a very cool piece that now you've moved into the advertising world. Hey, this is a Hot Wheels piece that only existed for 1 year. And because even though these same 16 cars would have been available beyond that, in 1969, they released a whole different set of cars. So this display would have only been used for 1 year. So, and it was never meant to survive. So you've got not only display, but you also have the cars.
That's what I would love to know about, is the person that's actually buying that, because that is just amazing.
Absolutely. Now, what I also find interesting is this one was sold through an auction gallery. So this was not eBay. They estimated it between $30,000 and $50,000, and it sold for $36,000. So it didn't even reach the high end. And this was just this year. So this was in the middle of COVID. So who knows if that was helping prices or lowering prices. But there were other examples of them. They paid more for the store display than they paid for a Dodge Viper. Let's see. I wanted to say there was another, this was like more of a vertical display here. I was gonna say there was another one. So this one sold for $8,500 back in 2014. So have they become more valuable since then? This is the case that I have, not with all 72 cars, and that's what obviously adds to the value. But that's the case that I had. I did not have the tire shaped case. So you could just kind of go through here and you can find some individual cars. So like this one, the little red Baron car 2018, that sold for $7,500. One of the things that came up fairly common as a high price point item was the Oldsmobile 442. And you can see this one was in October of last year, October 2020, so just 14 months ago, sold for $16,000 for one car, still in its blister pack. Wait. And then here's the purple version. Also, that sold in 2018 for $9,500. This was the fleet side that sold for $10,000 just a little over a year ago. So you've got some individual pieces. This one you can see is actually, look, the paint's chipped. This was in played condition, $10,000. But you can also see it's got the Supra Flame color. You can see that metallic color. So you start knowing some of the things to look at. You start recognizing, okay, well, this is an earlier one. Was it made in the USA? What made these individual pieces? But the Oldsmobile 442 shows up a lot as a high-end price point. And so I actually did a little bit I did some separate digging specifically for the Oldsmobile 442. And I think I've mentioned on my shows before, I've got a buddy who collects Oldsmobile stuff. So this is also something I was just curious. I couldn't really discover anything about the 442 as an actual car, meaning anything in particular, but I did find this listing on the hotwheels.fandom.com. So there's a website for anything. So there's a fan site for Hot Wheels. This is talking about the 1971, the original tooling. So this isn't even part of the Sweet 16. So this was one of the original releases, Oldsmobile 442. It says that is undoubtedly the rarest overall casting of all cars from the Redline era. It is highly sought after, and even cars in poor condition are somewhat valuable. So as a simple, be on the lookout, a simple bolo, an Oldsmobile 442, pretty much in any condition, will sell for at least hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So I just grabbed some snapshots of just what's out there right now. So these are listings, again, just doing a Hot Wheels Redline search. Now, okay,
that's crazy.
And it also has to be a typo, because when I opened the listing, it's selling a shipping box for $1 million that is empty. And in the description, it says, normally to get this box, you'd have to buy $20,000 to $40,000 worth of cars. Well, I would rather buy $20,000 worth of cars than pay $1 million for the box. So I think it's supposed to be like $1,000 or maybe even $10,000. I have no idea why this box, they feel that expensive, but you can ask anything you want. Doesn't mean you're going to sell it. But there are 46 people watching it trying to figure out a crazy man is actually going to sell it. So you've got
I feel like that's a scam.
Exactly. You've got this huge collection for $75,000. So then you get into the individual ones. So again, this is a special one, light green, 74 L-Ray special. So this is, again, this you can kind of see even from this tiny picture, it's that Supra Flame, the metallic color again. 32 people are watching this for $9,500. Now, again, why? I don't know where these people are shipping from. That shipping for something that weighs 3 ounces is going to cost $100. But I guess you want insurance, if you're going to ship $9,500. This is an absolute beater, Barracuda. And they knew what to list this as. It has the black interior. And as you go through the different variations, there's going to be certain ones that they weren't made as often. And this one is normally made with a white interior. So this one is an exception, and 26 people are watching that one. 150 people are watching this turbine with the pink color. We're going to talk about the Redline Hot Wheels Club Kit. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. You did have like the Bones motorcycles, the Bone Shaker. Those are some specialty ones. You're going to get some specialty. This was a prototype. That gets into a whole other world. There's really not a lot of control over prototypes. So I'm really not going to cover those all that much, but just be aware when you're comparing comps, you can't compare a prototype comp to a regular listing, so $3,000. Now they're saying in bags, but these would have been released in blister packs. So I'm not sure if this was a promotional piece. I didn't research each and every individual one of these. But you can see there are many, many listings where some of these cars are selling for thousands of dollars.
Now, that blister pack that you just showed up a little ways, I saw that it looked like it had an extra tire. Does it come with something like that?
Yes. Some of them, when they came with a Hot Wheels button. So hopefully, let's see if it opens it up. It opens itself up. So you've got a little custom Camaro, like a little coin or a little button. So those are collectible in and of themselves. And so that would be something that in some cases people might have the car, but they don't have the coin. So they might also be searching for the coins. I didn't do any research in the coins, so I don't know at what year all of these were released. Because this is saying 1967. Hot Wheels didn't exist in 1967. So unless this happens to be one of the original Sweet 16 that again had a production date a year before they were released, that would make this super, super early. So maybe that's why it's $2,900. So again, I'm not trying to claim that I am the expert in any of this. And I think Katie and Nate and I, we've all been in the same discussion, or at least Katie and I for the duo dives. In some cases, people don't want to be on our shows because, like, well, I'm not an expert. We're not looking for experts. We're looking for people that have been through this a little bit and can say, here's what to look for, here's what you don't look for. And if anyone in the chat knows more or has experience, share it, because this is all based on what I've just come across. And there might be reasons some of these individual, like even similar items, $2,500 for that little bug with the sunroof, where this is $2,000 for a pair. So it's kind of like, wait, why is one versus the other? Now, these are all list prices. What's most important is going into solds, because again, I can ask $1 million for a shipping box. Does not mean I'm going to get it. So in the sold comps, we've again, and Worth Point kind of shows this too, but for some reason, some things show up in eBay a little bit better. So again, you've got $40,000 for this version of the car that just sold a couple of months ago. So the other listing was a little bit older. 78 people were fighting for this. 78 bids.
Holy cow.
$40,000. Now this one is a prototype again, so that's a little specialty item. The Rumbler Bone Shaker. I really don't know a lot about the motorcycles. I don't know when these were released. $10,000. Look at the piece of crap that this car has become. I mean, this was not even played with. This was eaten by the dog. And this one, it was listed for $6,800. It took a best offer, so it may have only sold for $4,000 or $5,000. But still, there's something special about this one. So again, it's marked 1968, and it's specifying that it had long tailpipes HK. So it was made in Hong Kong, and maybe this was one of the ones that had differentiation, and maybe the longer pipes weren't manufactured for very long, because if they were longer, they probably broke off more in the mold. So in some cases, factory errors are always going to bring more money. This one's a little bit more obvious that it's upside down. So okay, that's a clear error. But there was one error I remember that I came across that it just said that it was facing the wrong way. And it looked like the packaging had been split open. I'm like, well, hell, I could split it open, turn it. Like, oh, look, it's an error. So I have no idea. Again, you kind of have to. It's reselling is research. Reselling is trying to figure out what. You can't just go off of one comp. You have to figure out. It's like, okay, here's one that sold for $4,600 and 30 people fought over it. And again, there was that old 442. You get that's one of those names you then know, okay, this is a little bit more valuable, but is it valuable to 4,600? Is it valuable to 2,600? You kind of have to look, because then you get into the big groups. Well, if you break down some of these individual pieces, this had a Camaro, a Mustang, a Maserati. Well, if there's 24 and they sold for $4,300, well, that averages out way lower than some of these individual pieces. And that's what I'm discovering as I'm going to list mine. I was going to list all 12 of them together. I have 12 that I'm trying to sell and 12 red lines that I'm trying to sell. And what I discovered is that some of the values are so across the board. Some of them only become valuable because someone needs that one for their collection. So they don't want to necessarily buy 7. So you're not going to get the best value by putting a whole bunch of them together, because people are still only going after, what their individual needs. So, and then there was a little 4-car set. I don't know when this came out, but that was $3,600. So again, there's that Diora, still don't know what that is, but it's got the surfboards. A lot of times the surfboards are missing. So it's always good to know, what you've got, what you don't have. So
I've never seen that car, but it's cool with the surfboard.
Absolutely. So
it actually reminds me of a sort of a Russian type of car I've seen occasionally.
Actually, we can go in. We go in back into the Sweet 16. It probably has a landing page that will say, so there's the Diora story. by Harry Bentley Bradley in Harry's own hands. Okay, well, oh my God, that's how you got in?
Oh
That's
my God.
amazing.
Oh, I love
I
it.
want one.
Oh, that's cool.
I love it more now. So there's a
Slick.
full size display at the Peterson Museum in LA. Again, variations between the Hong Kong and the United States. So it doesn't, and seeing that again, the surfboards pop off. So those will be missing. Color combinations. Yeah. So you'd have to go and read the actual article to find out what this was. A panel of judges was made up of Chrysler's. The contest results were announced in February 1966 issue of Car Model. So it was a new kit for model builders. Okay. So that evidently was a Dodge Diora. Weird. And it included an A100 pickup body parts for an A100 pickup truck and a Ford wagon. Okay. I didn't even go down that. I mean, it's just a weird looking one, and that's why some of them are going to be popular because they're weird looking. So one of the things I wanted to cover a little bit, this comes from not from that normal, the other site. This was just what I started searching for specifically for fakes. There's going to be two different types of reproductions. There's reproductions and then there's fakes. Because some of these pieces sell for big bucks, as I was showing, there is an actual market for fakes. So particularly when you're dealing with the blister packs, because it's the blister pack that gives a ton, like 80% of the value is if it's still in a blister pack. And so there's just a lot of fun stuff in here, like little things that even in the example, H in hot has a straight top. Here it's curved. It is. Like I barely can tell that that's curved. So I could totally see where someone who was trying to proof the fake did not think to recognize that even though this is totally straight, it looks fine, there is a little bit more of a sexier curve here. The F in California drops below the other letters. Okay. In this one, it doesn't. So it's just like and again, you're not going to be able to mentally keep all of this information. But if you're dealing in thousands of dollars and you've got an item could sell for 10,000 and you're getting it offered to you for 1,000, this is when you start digging a sheet like this up. Because if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So you've got just general, particularly in the blister packs, you've got specific areas of actual fakes. Like this is not anything other than someone is trying to rip you off. Then you get into questionable trying to rip you off. So this is Amazon. Anybody could hop onto Amazon and buy redline wheels. So you've got these wheels have the closed fronts. So these, I believe, are the capped style redlines. The theory behind these would be if you already have a capped line or a red line capped wheel and it's been damaged, the dog chewed it, whatever, you could buy replacement and then you legitimately are making a red line into a red line. However, there could be ways that you could rip the axle out of an original red line that's in really bad condition and put it in a newer model and there's just a lot of things that you need, even though these are available on Amazon. The theory would be that they're not necessarily trying to take advantage of you because if they're just replacing, making the wheels look nicer. But if they're actually taking the body of the car apart, which in some of the models, that's what you have to do, that's a whole other level. So again, knowing, what should have a red line versus what should not have a red line, you may not know that they replaced them, but if they're supposed to have the red lines and they were capped and they're still capped, well, are you any worse off? But just be aware that is out there. You also have, and I didn't really get into one of the examples I lost when I was going through the country of origin. Some of them in Hong Kong, they used a lot of decals and stickers. In the United States, they used a lot of paint. And so in some cases, you can actually buy those decals over again. So if the decal fell off of a Baja Bruiser, or if it's in really, really bad shape from being played with, you can scrape it the rest of the way off and then buy a brand new label, a decal to go on it. It's clearly trying to refurbish something. And if they just do it, to make it look nicer and they disclose it, okay, are you any worse off? But if they put it on there and then they try and just lightly buff it a little bit so it looks like it was a little worn, but all the graphics are still there. Like I have a Ferrari that the Ferrari logo is almost completely missing. That's going to hurt the value, because unless you know it, you don't even know it's a Ferrari, because basically it's a headless horse. So if you recreated the labels, you're going to improve the value, but you're actually cheating the buyer. So just be aware those decals do exist in the wild. Also, very important to know, and this is that big warning that was at the very beginning, just because it has a red line doesn't mean it's a original red line. There is a red line collectors club. Now, irony of ironies, the example that they're giving does not have a red line on it. So I really don't understand the club. I don't know the purpose of the club. It created in 2001, and a lot of the items that have been available almost always get sold in their blister packs, because these are people that joined the collectors club specifically because they wanted to collect Hot Wheels. So they're collecting them to display, not to play with. So you can see they don't have huge values, and in most cases, the cars that they're releasing in the from what I can tell, this would be a case where if somebody's really into this, they're going to know more than I do. But from what I could figure out researching the Collectors Club, it does not appear that they're trying to re-release any of the original Redline models. They're releasing models that came out later, or brand new models that never came out, and they're doing a Tesla, I believe, next. They're trying to do them as a collector's club piece so that they have a built-in market. And I think the way I understand the way it works is you join the membership. It's $10 per year. That just says that you're a member. That doesn't really get you anything. It gives you the option to then purchase priority access to sales. So you still have to buy the actual cars when they come out, but they're available to collectors club members first. And then after that, they go on to the secondary market, and you will see a wide variety of items that sell for, I think a lot of them are selling for like 40 or $50. These are a series of like 20. They're not trying to fake anything. They're not trying to confuse anything. The models on the bottom, the diecast would actually have the year that it was made for the club. So it would say 2006, so you're not confused that it might have been something from 72. They're always going to have the through wheels, like everything. And there's a whole lifespan after 77 with wheels and paint. And I didn't even want to try and touch any of that. But the collectors clubs are not trying to confuse anybody. They're not trying to mess up the market. They're always going to be distinguishable. However, you could run yourself into a situation where either a unknowing seller or an unscrupulous seller will take it out of the blister pack and just say, look, it's red lines, therefore it's worth $1,000. You need to know why it's not. And that's it. That is our Hot Wheels red line life lesson. And this took
that was fascinating. There's just so many details to cover, Patrick, and I had no idea that they were that involved.
No. Neither did I until I sat down to do this. I canceled something today because I'm like, damn, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. And I like all these tabs. I'm trying to find all these examples. And I mean, it's interesting to do the research because it is very trackable. It's one of those, like, it could be this, could be that, but all that information's there. So it's overwhelming to try and get it, and for me to give it to everyone in some semblance of order. But the fact of the matter is, if you are holding a piece, it's pretty easy to research it to say, okay, what should this look like? Well, if it were like a 1969 version, it would have this kind of wheel. Oh, it doesn't. All right, well, then that means it's later. It has this type of wheel, but at one point the body's changed to plastic. Like, okay, well, that's something way different. I will say, if you ever have a plastic die-cast body where the actual bottom is plastic and it has a red line on it, yeah, you got a fake. And you've got an idiot trying to sell you a fake, because they never would have had the plastic bodies when they were still the red line wheels. So there's just all these things that it's kind of like my thing with European porcelain. Get a stamp on there, and it's, there's a lot to track and there's a lot of nuances, but that's kind of what makes it fun. So this was a fun one to do, totally self-serving. An hour ago, I had 2 listings go live on my eBay channel. So I am selling. So let's see. I'm selling in the first 2 listings. I'm selling the little Rocket Buy baby that's shown here and the Eldorado. I'm showing those 2, and I'm selling 2 others along with them. Basically, I did 1 listing as the 2 that I had that were made in the USA. Of my 12, only 2 of them were made in the USA. And then the other 2 were the only 2 that I had that were late enough to be the complete through line wheels. So, so I just kind of put those up, kind of testing the market to see, there's a lot of these available, and mine are in played condition. So in some cases they could still be worth something, but I don't know how much attention they're going to get. So we shall see. So it was fun to do the prep work. And then I'm sitting here typing the most extensive eBay listing I've ever written with all this information. I'm like, well, this is kind of wheel, and this is what it has, and this is the year. Because I'm like, I know all this information. I must share it. So.
And the person that's buying those will be grateful that you have shared that information.
Exactly. Again, knowledge is power, and that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone joining in tonight. We've got the end of this triptych. So the next thing we've got coming up is we have a duo dive between Katie and I. It's coming up this Wednesday, and I am actually hosting that as well. So coming back to the Trusty Huckster Mercantile YouTube channel will be Sam, Stud with the Stash, from Dining at Sea. He is actually going to share his collection of perpetual calendars. So Katie and I will be sharing our collections of calendars, plus some absolutely baffling research that I did at the same time I was researching all the Hot Wheels stuff. I was getting very confused, where we will talk about perpetual calendars. So that will be Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on my channel, Trusty Huckster Mercantile. And then Thursday, I have my sale will return. I still am at the later time slot. So 11 p.m. Eastern, I will have my live sale, late night live sale on my channel, 11 p.m. on Thursday. And that will be hopefully every Thursday this month. I'm in rehearsals for a show, and I might have to turn off my sales at the end of the month as we get closer to the show, but I'll let you know as we get to that. What do you got coming up, Katie?
Well, as Patrick mentioned, I am part of the Duo Dive, so that will be Wednesday on Patrick's channel at 9:30 p.m. So I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, I'll have some fun content coming out on my YouTube channel this week.
Fantastic. And Nate, I don't think there's anything planned for his YouTube channel, but I think you got some collections came in recently. You're going to be updating your Instagram channel anytime soon, Nate?
Yeah, I have a backlog of pictures of friend mail that I need to post on Instagram. I've got a few things going on here at the moment, so my social media presence is a little bit light at the moment.
So just make sure you are following Katie, Nate, and me. All of our links are in the description of the video, so that when we do post things, you will be able to see them and get notifications on them. But appreciate you all hanging out here for the triptych. So we will be returning with another triptych next week. That'll be hosted by Katie. So that'll be next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Vintage and Vinyl YouTube channel. So we'll be doing that next week. And again, we appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us. And for me, appreciate you putting your trust in Trusty Huckster. So everyone have a great night. And thanks so much for joining us. And we will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, friends.